Hey everybody, how's it going? Andrew here, and I just have another quick favor to ask of all of you. If you're a fan of the show, share it with someone you know. I really can't say this enough, but more importantly, it's not just about sharing the show. It's really about if you know of someone out there who is either struggling or you know that the information and the discussions we have on the podcast could be helpful for them, then please just share it with them. If you truly feel that's going to be the case, that's all I'm really asking for you. So don't just like blast it out to everybody. I mean, sure, that's cool. It looks nice, but really let's have some intent behind with why we're actually sharing the show. That's all that I ask of you for this. So again, if you're a fan of the show, share it with someone you know. Really appreciate all of you for being such great listeners. And in that in mind, let's get right to the show. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas. I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to be talking about leveraging market research and Reddit for niche games. Now, making any game has its challenges, but making one that caters to a niche audience can be an extremely daunting task. Between discovering a limited market and having a few games to compare as yours to, well, what you thought was an opportunity could quickly look like a big risk. But thankfully, our guest today shares how a little market research and understanding of your audience allows you to be more authentic with players while tackling other challenges around awareness efforts on platforms like Reddit and beyond. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey everybody, and we're back. And today with us, I have Alice Ruppert with us on the show. Alice, how are you today? And thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, thank you. It's great. It's great to be here.
Awesome, awesome. Well, for those of you who don't know, Alice, a quick introduction here, is a game designer, producer, writer, and consultant. And what's really cool about her is a lot of her core expertise is actually in horse games and representations and implementations of horses in games. A very, very specific skill set there, but pretty awesome, honestly. And in addition to that, I mean, she has lots of expertise in social media marketing, community building, and management. Tons going on there. For example, you worked on some titles such as Horse Tales, Emerald Valley Ranch, where you were the creative producer.
Yes.
Also, Wild Shade, you were doing the social media and community there. And Air Console, which is a party gaming platform for local multiplayer games with smartphones as controllers. And you were the head of games there. I mean, wow, really like diverse and focused, stuff going on there. And of course, lots of other projects. We probably could talk lots of time on those, but just don't have the time for. But again, really great stuff going on there. And a few other things I want to call out. And this is so fascinating for me in particular. So back in like 2019, you created Main Quest, which is a site that's just dedicated to horses and games about horses, just writing lots of articles on that subject. Like how? Like it's like I still find it. I know we were talking before the show just how interesting it is to just write so much about one thing in particular, which is horses and games. And we would never think that like, wow, that could be a thing. But you go to Main Quest, folks, and you'll see that there's endless amounts. But how did that come about? Just real quick, share with us about that because that's really interesting.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, the very short version is I've been into video games all my life. I've been into horse riding all my life, and it actually took a long time for the two of those to come together. Because it's always just like going horse riding was always a hobby I kept separate from work,
Yep.
like most people do. And basically, I just started commenting on horses in games mostly via Twitter, and I found that felt like I found some resonance with that. Not just in terms of like people who cared about the subject, but just people who were like, wow, this is a thing I've never thought about before, but I enjoy you talking about it. And so that's kind of how that came to pass. And yeah, and then I was like, well, okay, so if I wanted to talk more about the subject, what would I talk about? And like before launching the website in fall 2018, I had already a really really long list of possible articles that I wanted to write, and most of my article ideas from that backlog are still around because I haven't gotten around to them in 5 years, because there's always
Wow.
new stuff coming up and always new ideas and always new games to review, new developers to interview, new topics to analyze. And so like I definitely still in my notes of like things I planned before launching the website that I haven't gotten to since 2018.
Oh my goodness. And that's just amazing. It's just like not only do you have this like abundance of other stuff that you would love to talk about and stuff, but the fact that you're finding so many new things on like I was saying to you earlier before recording was just like at face value you don't think that there's a lot, but I mean, come on, you have like close to a 5 year backlog of content, like so it's just in how
Yeah.
you apply it in those perspectives, which I think is again amazing.
I think
Um,
it's also like a matter of sort of like there's we can talk about a lot of things in video games by just focusing on video games, but when you combine the topic of video games with any other topic, and you could do that with all sorts of things, right? You can
mm,
literally any hobby you have, be it like I don't know, be it cooking and food, or be it fashion and like sewing, or be it plants and and gardening. Like every one of those has interlapped with video games at some point, and you could start analyzing how those have interlapped and what games exist that tackle this topic. Like because video games as a medium can overlap with any sort of topic imaginable and give you a ton of ways to talk about it, because video games have their own complexity, and whatever topic you pick would also have its own complexity. So like yeah, there's a ton to talk about, and I would personally I would love it if a site like the main quest existed for not just horses, but like I don't know, insert any other animal, any other craft, any
right,
other
right.
hobby, any other whatever.
Well, who knows? Maybe after we dive into a lot of some of the things that you were just talking about, maybe this could be a starting point for some people to make that
I would
happen.
hope so. I would hope so.
But that's
Somebody has already made like a similar website, but with dragons. It's called Wyverns and Waypoints. I highly recommend it.
oh, nice, nice. Okay, so it is happening, but hey, maybe we can promote more of that awesome thinking and sharing of such unique perspectives, because that's what we're really here and all about for on IGM. But just to wrap up a little thing, a little more about you. I mean, on top of just creating this awesome site, focusing on horses, you've also given a lot of numerous talks and presentations, including participation in the GDC pitch, which is back in, I believe, in 2017, but also like in your spare time, as you shared a little bit with us about horse riding, of course, but you love fantasy writing, cooking, jigsaw puzzles, and of course, playing video games. So awesome thing, like just such an interesting background. And I want to dig into what you were sharing with us a moment ago about looking at things differently, kind of diving into the niche and how to approach that. But first and foremost, I got to put you in the Q box round like we do for all our guests. And folks, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, it's just a series of random questions we've prepared for Alice here today. So, Alice, are you ready for our Q box round?
I am.
All right, excellent. Um, First, what was your childhood favorite game?
The Sims 2 is the one I spent the most time with. Though the on-brand answer would be My Horse Farm, because that's like the horse game I was obsessed with as a kid.
All right, we'll include both, but the on-brand response, I love it. All right, what's one habit that has contributed to your success, and however you define success? You know.
I think I've um, well, if I had to summarize it very broadly, like trying to communicate as best I can, like because I think like every problem you have can be solved by talking to people about the problem you're having about the
Yep.
and like just finding a solution together. And I think one huge important part of that is just like also acknowledging when you mess something up and sort of working towards solutions.
Mm.
Um, so just I don't know. I've had a few conversations with people over the years where I sort of was a bit surprised that not everyone does that. Where it's like my personal view is that like when I realize I messed something up, when I realize made a mistake, or that I don't know, even that I don't know if I'm confused about something, I'm not sure how to do something. Um, just address that. I say like, okay, so here's what I did wrong, and here's what we're gonna do about it. And
Mm.
I once had a coworker be super impressed at like, well, it's like somebody just saying like they messed up. Like I couldn't do that. I couldn't like, um, or like I couldn't admit that so easily after like in the context of a relationship, but still I think it applies to professional relationships too. So like
Mm.
just I don't know, acknowledging everything that you did wrong and learning from it, and just working solution oriented. I think that can get you through everything. And it sounds so basic, but I do think it's a hugely important part of just like getting anywhere, and also making it pleasant to like making it pleasant for others to work with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to digress uh, here, but other than just say I completely agree with you and can relate 100% on that because I found that those same things just in a way it's very empowering.
Yeah.
Empowering and like you said, great learning experience and everything else there. So, no, I'm glad you shared that one because I think that's a great one that a lot of people don't think about or talk about often. Last but not least, what game are you playing right now?
I'm playing Cult of the Lamb, and I'm playing Star Equestrian. So
Ah,
sorry, I have
I
one
know.
very on brand
I was waiting for it.
response, which is
I was like, I hope you deliver, and sure enough, you did. Excellent.
yeah, but it's true. Like sometimes I only play horse games for like work, like research and review purposes. But no, I've actually been having fun with Star Equestrian. Um,
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insight and answers and learn and allowing us to get to know you a little bit better through the Q box round. But now we're gonna start digging into our discussion why we're here today, which is leveraging some market research and Reddit for niche games. How I want to kick this off is just calling out to saying like creating a niche game is obviously a great opportunity to really cater to specific audiences. But that said, how important is it to be able to relate or to have, let's say, the same interests as that particular audience?
I think it depends. I mean, for me personally, the reason why I got into the specific niche of like horse games and horse riding games is because I related to that audience. Like because I was that audience. That's really my main motivation behind also getting professionally into this niche is that I, as a player, like I played those horse games as a kid. Then I realized, how did this genre not make any progress in the past 10 to 15 years? And then I started commenting about that. And then eventually I got hired to actually do that. So
Hmm.
that's a very short version. Um, for me, I definitely came from like, I mean, of course, I also got the relevant game dev experience as part of that process.
Yep.
It's not that I only that it was only the interest driving me. Um, but uh, through my like because I interview a lot of game developers who work in like who make games for that niche, and very few of them have that same background. Like very few of them
Hmm.
come into it specifically from the background of or like from the motivation of wanting to make games with this exact subject matter. And I think it really just depends. You can definitely make a game for a niche, even if you don't like, even if that's not where your passion naturally lies. But you have to respect it, and you have to put in the work and research to find out what that niche audience wants. So we're definitely seeing this nowadays more with the horse game niche, that people are starting to take this audience seriously, and that people are also starting to by people I mean developers of games, because it used to be very like driven exclusively by traditional publishers who had very small budgets, very small, like very tight. margins also, and who would not have a lot of time to actually engage with their target audience. And I think that is slowly getting getting more of a thing, like to actually ask people in advance for like what do they care about and what is actually important to them, and who are actually the people who you expect to play this game in the end. And that's, I know that sounds super basic. Like engaging with your target audience sounds really, really basic, but in this niche, it because it usually was like because the games in the market were often aimed at children, and publishers often didn't reach those children before the games were actually on the shelf in stores. That didn't used to happen a lot. So yeah, I do think it's possible to make a game for a niche that you are not naturally, so to say, part of, but only if you really, if you consider research and connecting with your target audience a core and crucial part of not just marketing your game, but also of your concept. Like
Yeah.
you need to take that into account from day one, basically.
Yeah, and it's I think even if we want to expound on this just a little bit further, I think this is more common that we're seeing now in the industry as well too, and other people in the industry are calling out to. It's like no longer can you just simply make a game and have these ideas or like a good idea in terms of how the subject matter or other things are going to be represented. There needs to be that extra length or investment in terms of that level of research to fully understand what is the subject matter, what like who does this apply to, who's it going to resonate with,
Mm-hmm.
because it's in essence, it's doing a disservice to the global community, which is playing games. But also, it's just I think it just also makes for a better experience overall too to really dive into these things. And players are getting a lot more savvy every day, so this level of detail and
Yeah,
stuff is
exactly. I
important.
think I think it requires a certain degree of authenticity. Like
Right.
you can't feign your way into, like, you can't pretend to be interested in a thing as a creator. Like you can't, because it's gonna show. Like it's if you half-ass your development, or like your if you half-ass your research for a specific topic that you're covering in your game, anyone with an interest in that topic is gonna notice, and
Right.
yeah, that's definitely, like, you can't phone it in so easily.
Exactly. So, with that in mind, excuse me here, I would like to kind of go in and dive in a little bit more and how what we were just talking about kind of relates to market research. Because I know that, like, with some niche audiences, it can be difficult to get a sense, of the market if there aren't, lots of games to compare to, for example, right? So, in let's just say for this case, what's a good way to approach this problem while looking for opportunities and potentially avoiding red flags?
Yeah, so that's definitely something that I think is also that has massively held back this niche, because if anyone, like, so the horse game niche, like calling it horse games is already like is making a bunch of assumptions, because it treats it treats it like a genre, but it's not really a genre in the
Mm,
same sense that a roguelite is a genre, or a I don't know, an adventure is a genre, or a visual novel is a genre, um, because instead it's a topic, right?
right.
It's a genre by theme and not by mechanics, which is how we usually describe game genres. Um, and so that can sort of already imply a bunch of assumptions that are dangerous to make, because it also sort of limits your vision of what can what can be a horse game, because that can be a lot broader. It doesn't need to be like a stable build up tournament participation simulator or whatever.
Right.
Um, but you're right that, like, games in this specific niche were always, especially when we're looking at that traditionally published market that I mentioned before, which is basically that was all we had for the longest time. So maybe just as a little bit of context, the concept of the indie horse game is very recent, at least in terms of the sort of PC games market. So that's only that, like, the first indie horse games are releasing on Steam this year, whereas, of course, the general democratization of games, and like more people releasing their own games on Steam has been going on for quite a while. Um, But in horse games, it's really new. Like before that, we had a bunch of browser-based games that were made by amateur indie teams, but really the PC and console game market was hugely dominated by very traditional publishers. Um, and those publishers would always make exactly that same assumption. Like they would always compare only to their own niche, their own past titles, and in that also assume that there was no growth possible because they saw
Mm.
like um, traditional publishers in this niche would just bring out a new horse game for kids every year, sell X number of copies, and assume okay we can't sell more, so we can't invest more budget, so we can't do it bigger. So they would do it again the next year, and it would just like be the whole operation would be running on these very tight margins with no room for like actually doing something different and actually doing something else. And this is exactly what what led the niche to completely burn out in the late 2000s. Because yeah, the market was flooded with just like dozens of these games. Well, hundreds over the whole course of the decade. It was
Yeah,
probably
they're all
hundreds.
basically the
Um,
same, right?
well, they had very similar feature lists without or like with not enough meaningful iteration between
Mm.
them. And exactly this problem that you mentioned in your question, like if there aren't any games to compare to, or if there are just so few to compare to, you also don't get to a point where you see something bigger, or like where you see options for something bigger. Um, and that, in my opinion, just leads to a lot of publishers completely ignoring the potential of this target audience, which we do know exists because there are games that engage with the target audience. So, like the one example that I always like to make is Star Stable Online, which is a very horsey, very girly, like adventure MMO experience. But like I said, it's an MMO. It's been going on and thriving for what is it, 12 years at this point, even
Wow.
though it has the target audience of 8 to 18-year-old girls who play MMOs on PC. Like if somebody pitched that to you in 2011, you would not have guessed that that was a profitable target audience, and yet they've been proving it since then. And when I say like, I mean massive multiplayer online. They have like 500,000 active users every month. So this is not a small title. This competes with many of the MMOs that are household names, and yet nobody takes it as inspiration for, oh, we could do something similar. Um,
Wow.
so like, yeah, this is happening all the time. Everybody constantly assumes that, oh, there's no games in this niche that compare. Like even those traditional publishers that I mentioned, they make that exact same assumption because they say, oh yeah, well that exists, but now it doesn't apply to us. That doesn't compare. Um, and like what in terms of for the rest of your questions, like what's the way to approach this? I think we need to sort of not see it so strictly. I think when making a game with that very specific target audience, you need to not just focus on this hyper specific niche of, for example, 8 to 18-year-old girls who play horse games on PC.
Mm.
But also think about, okay, so where is the overlap with other relevant target audiences? So, for example, with this game, do I also reach the kind of people who, for example, play farm management games like Stardew Valley and or like Harvest Moon series and all of those like sort of cozy farm homestead managing games, because there's a ton of overlap in those, and yet that overlap doesn't happen because the people who do make horse games don't really branch out into that sort of cozy gamer audience because they think of it as something too specific and too niche. But I think that's dumb, frankly. I think that's a really limited way to view it. And yeah, I think from like the perspective of the niche that I work in, I think more studios should sort of find overlap with other relevant target audiences and sort of expand to those as well and think about, okay, well, what makes Stardew Valley players play Stardew Valley, and is that something that we can make our own game overlap with? Or well, and I think that the same can be applied to lots of topics. Like if I'm in this specific niche, but I'm close to this other niche, but which maybe isn't that specific a niche, but just like a genre of games. Like how can I tag into that, or like how can I get a section of that market and that audience?
Yeah. No, these are such interesting points and everything because part of the perspective I came from with the question too was like in almost general business terms, it's like, oh, if you don't see that there's a lot of demand for something, then therefore you might not want to create a product that doesn't have
Mm,
demand, right? But it's not so much so in kind of what you alluded to a little bit earlier too, talking about the genres and not like confusing in terms of treating games that are like have a specific genre but confusing that genre with actually an interest and not creating a new
mm,
genre, right? But in my point being is that what you're saying here is it's in the overlap of either themes or interests or other things that are relative to these genres or whatnot because they basically call out to, okay, there might not be a lot of this product type in the market now, as you were saying with traditional published games in the past. It's more of, hey, there's always, I mean, how long has horse riding been going on as far as we can. Yeah, I know.
1,000 years.
Right. Right. So naturally there would have to be some type of like interest or group or audience or market that's has always existed, but just because we've never seen it in a particular platform industry genre doesn't mean it's not a valuable space. But
And I think that's also, I mean, that aspect of like people thinking, well, yeah, of course people ride horses, but those people aren't gamers, and like
mm,
that misconception definitely exists. Um, and yeah, of course, there's a lot of equestrians who don't play video games, and of course, there's a lot of gamers who don't care about horses. But like, they are two such huge hobbies that significant overlap exists, and like I think that's also a highly gendered thing because people
mm.
think video games are for boys and horses are for girls, so they assume that overlap is even smaller. Like that's very simplified. I realize that most people nowadays have caught up to the fact that women play video games, but still, I think that that still colors this general perception of the size of this market, um, and uh, and yeah, that definitely leads to further underestimating yeah,
Yeah.
the the market opportunities.
Right, absolutely. Now, one thing I want to dive into a little bit more too, as we kind of talk about some market research and let's say like forms of communication. I mean, one of the areas that you specialize in is really like in terms of like the representations and implementations of actual horses in game. So within this context, and for my next question, I'm curious in terms of when you're creating a game for a niche audience, what types of messaging or even visual details are key when communicating with that audience?
I think it's impossible to answer that broadly. I think it highly depends on the audience that you're catering to, because in the sense that, like, for example, I know because I'm in such regular exchange with this niche target audience. I know like what is impressive to them and what is not.
Okay.
So, to make an example, horses in video games, one thing that we see them do a lot is just like, um, I mean, but basically just mounting a horse and galloping off somewhere is something that we see a lot in games, right? We're very used to horses as vehicles of transport. So like
Right.
we see
Or
that in also in every trailer of an Assassin's Creed, a Witcher game, etc.
right.
We know that, okay, yeah, you just get up and you gallop somewhere.
Or even beyond that, like in lots of forms of media, we have this idea in our heads in terms of that
Exactly.
experience.
So this is standard, and there's also nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. But this is something that might not be the most impressive thing. So like depending on how it's done. I mean, I'm not gonna. I'm enough of a horse girl to admit that watching a horse gallop can always be cool if it's just like if it's well done and well animated. But for example, something we see a lot less is just horses being cute in some way. I realize that again sounds super basic, but something that, for example, I've never seen in any game is horses interacting with each other.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Yep.
and like they do that all the time. Horses are herd animals. They are very
Yeah.
social, and so, like even if you just even if just it's two horses riding next to each other, and one of them might like I don't know, maybe like nuzzle the other one or reach out to it, like that sort of thing happens, or especially if they're I don't know if your game has wild horses in them or so,
Mm.
or like they can interact. And that's just one example. I'm not saying every game should do that, but it's one simple example where like I know that if I showed a game trailer where I can see horses in a pasture interacting with each other, like for example, scratching each other's backs, like they do that with their mouths, like they
Yeah.
sort of reach around each other's back and scratch each other. Um, I know I know immediately that this niche audience, they would be so hyped for this because they've
Mm.
never seen that before. Because it's a very natural part of like a thing that you see horses do all the time if you interact with them in real life, but it's something that media do not represent. And that's just one tiny example. So like, um, in order to know which things appeal to your niche audience, you also need to know how does that thing get misrepresented, or just misrepresented, but just like what is the common representation of it, and what is something that the niche audience can get really excited for.
Mm.
Um, to make another really straightforward example is I'm not sure if there's a famous like meme Tumblr post which is like every horse movie and or like every horse story, and there's a lot of tropes in this genre that applies not just to video games but also to mostly to movies in this case. But like so, a troubled teen arrives at a farm and there's one wild horse that nobody can ride, and so the troubled teenager is like, oh no, we're not so different, you and I. And then it's like the business guy shows up and says like, no, we'll have to sell the farm. The only way to save the farm is if you ride a tournament on this untamable horse. And the troubled teen who's never ridden before is like, I get you, and mounts the horse and rides a winning round or whatever. Like, so like this is a standard story. This is very very like, I mean, tropes exist for a reason. We reuse them because we because some of them are good. But still, this is another such example where like if I wanted to sell someone a horse game, I would not approach him with this story because I know that this niche audience has seen this 1,000 times before and they are looking for something else. Like I would try to do, I don't know, tell any story that isn't exactly that, for example. And that's why I think it's hard to answer that generally. Like, what is important when messaging, when communicating that audience? Like, you need to know the audience. That's kind of the point.
Yeah.
You can't say like you can't give it. I don't think it's possible to give a very general tip of like do that, don't do that, but just like, well, yeah, know what they want, know what they have, like know what they get and know what they don't get, so that you can offer them the thing they don't usually get, and get them really excited for it.
Yeah. No, no, well said. And I think it's great that you just dove in and provided that very specific example. Yes, it might not necessarily be directly applicable to people listening today, but I think they can start connecting the dots in terms of, hey, what level of detail can I show with my theme, with my game or whatever, that can really resonate with that audience and such. And those are such key examples, and really appreciate you sharing those because again,
Yeah, I
like,
think.
yeah, go.
Yeah, I think in many other types of marketing, it maybe wouldn't thematically apply so much to like what do you get wrong about a specific animal or something, but it would still apply. Like you need to be aware of the meta, so to say. Like
Yeah.
if
Yep.
if I make I don't know, if I make a real time strategy game, I need to know what other real time strategy game there are, what they do, and what people like and dislike about them. And it's exactly the same in this stupidly detailed horse game niche. Like I need to know what the other one, what the competitors are doing, and where they succeed, where they fail, and what the audience thinks about them, so that I can offer them the thing that they want or the thing that they don't want,
Right.
and avoid the thing that they don't want.
Yeah. So basically, it boils down to, if we oversimplify this here, what are the pain points the players are having, and what are the things of that fulfill those players, and how is it a possibility of meeting fulfilling that and or improving upon it?
Yeah, exactly.
Sweet. All right. Well, I want to shift gears a little bit because this is and it's kind of different in a way, but there's a reason I'm putting this here because I think there's a lot that's relative based off of what we were talking about with market research, and that is leveraging Reddit of all places for some research and other opportunities. So with that in mind, I know that like typically most people may think of Reddit as, and I'm being very general here, but as a platform to be used only as an awareness channel. But how would you think that this mindset might be limiting, and what other opportunities can be leveraged from Reddit, or from just not just Reddit, but from Reddit's many communities, especially for niche games?
Well, I think generally speaking, if you're gonna use Reddit as an awareness channel only, and you're like if you approach it from a very marketing like from a marketing perspective, and you have your social media, and you're thinking, oh, maybe we should also do Reddit and use that for awareness, I think you're gonna have a very bad time, because Reddit doesn't lend itself to be used that way.
Hmm.
Reddit is very much like the general idea of site-wide ready cat on Reddit is that you don't use it as a company. It's fine, like, or like the way I think the way they word it is like, it's fine to be a Redditor who also has a company, but it's not fine to be a company with a Reddit account. There are
Yep.
exceptions to this, of course. Companies with Reddit account exist, but generally speaking, many of the biggest subreddits like are not going to just let you advertise your product without like unless they feel like you're really just a part of the community and genuinely engaging. Um, so that's one thing. One thing that I always tell people when they ask me about Reddit marketing is like, if your sole interest in the platform is to advertise, you can buy ads, of course. That's one thing.
Yep.
But that's not like what most people are hoping for. Like most people are trying to get that organic reach because that can be huge. Because on Reddit, it's all based on upvotes, right? So ads don't usually get upvoted. Ads only get exactly as many views as you pay for. Whereas with an organic post, you can get millions of views at no cost if you know what you're doing and if people are genuinely interested. But in order to do that, you really need you need to know the platform. And if you only come at it like if I had a marketing budget, I would never like if I had to, like a marketing team to manage, let me put it like that, I would never assign a person to get into Reddit on work time, maintain a healthy Reddit account, and then use that account to market, because it would take so many work hours with such a small chance of actual virality. I think the only way
Hmm.
to use Reddit in a way like for awareness in a sense, like the only way to use it in an economic sense is if you're already using it to a degree, or if you're fine with using it in your free time as well. Because using it only for work is not gonna. It's I don't think it can work out, because I think you're gonna have a bad time and everybody's gonna see through you and it's gonna be kind of miserable.
So that said, I mean, very good points and stuff in terms of approaching it from that perspective. And I think a little of us kind of what you're leading towards here too goes hand in hand in terms of, well, one, it's like there's lots of communities out there, interest groups, things like that. So there's one factor of, like you said, using your spare time is better because you can actually participate in and be a part of these various communities, and in them there's a lot of things that could probably be discovered and relate to, especially if you're, making a game in addition to that. So I guess I would love for you to share your thoughts a little bit on that process too, because again, it's not so much. Understandably, it's not about the strictly using this platform as a promotion tool, but also as a means to, I guess, connect more with your
Mm.
potential audience or other communities in general.
Yeah, I think that is definitely where, like, that is definitely a thing that makes sense, or like a way to use Reddit as a in a professional capacity. Let's put it like that. I mean, you're not going to be a professional redditor, but like if you use it for work in some way, I do think that using it as a, well, yeah, as a, I mean, not for research. That sounds like that sounds like I'm saying you should believe things just because you read them on Reddit. That's of
Well,
course also not
there's
the case.
that definitely. Like you, yeah,
Um,
that could be bad.
but yeah, no, I think Reddit is very much like community based and grouped by interest, right? And some of those interests are very, very broad and can in turn also reach very, very many people. But on the other hand, they will also not give you a very good overview of, like, I don't know, a specific niche or something. But then again, yeah, many game genres, many niches, many topics have their own communities on Reddit, and you can definitely use that to engage with that audience, and you can also use that sort of to to learn exactly that meta that I was talking about. So like if
Mm,
you're probably going to be able to find a subreddit for your genre and learn, and that's probably for any game genre. Let's be real.
yep.
Um, you're probably going to find a community for that and be able to discuss it with them. But that's also not limited to Reddit. You're going to also find a Discord server or a Facebook group or whatever for
Right.
most game genres, or maybe even a forum message board type thing. Um, so that's like just getting in touch with your community, with your potential audience. That's something that can be done via Reddit, but I also don't think Reddit is unique in that way. Um, I think really what makes it kind of what makes it kind of tricky, I think, for most people who try to get into Reddit or like into game marketing via Reddit is that they hear of someone's success and they
Mm,
have no clue how what is like success in game marketing. I mean, because like if I've promoted games on Reddit that I was working on, so like I've posted about the games I was making. I've also sometimes posted about games that friends of mine were making, and it was the biggest successes were honestly the sort of spontaneous ones. And whenever I tried to sort of deliberately reproduce it, it was really fucking hard. Um, and Yeah, so if you see like, oh, this person posted that and it got, I don't know, 20 million views, and you're gonna be like, I can do that too, you're probably wrong because you have no idea what what goes into it. And that can be either factors of like doing things right and sort of applying a certain skill and knowledge of the platform, and it can also be a huge factor of luck because we're still like we're talking virality here, and it's never calculable in a complete way.
Yeah, and you know what? On that topic, I want to dive into that a little bit more too, because again, like there's still going to be people that try to leverage platforms like Reddit in a promotional sense, right? So knowing this, and as you kind of called out to already before, I mean, it can basically be a double-edged sword, and
Hmm.
it can, especially from organic promotion, and even I've seen it in ads too, where that same thing could happen as well. So, would you think? Is it even possible? Like, is there a particular approach that either you have seen or know of, or even from your own experience, that can make this platform in particular more like a single-edged Buster Sword for organic promotion? And sorry, everybody, for the Final Fantasy reference. I had to.
um, I think I think the way to promote on Reddit is to be genuine about it and not just like I think it boils down to that Reddit wide guideline of like, okay, you're allowed to be a Redditor who promotes a product, but you need to be a Redditor first. And Reddit is a little bit special from other social media platforms in that that term, for example, even exists. Like, I don't know, you don't hear somebody call themselves a Facebooker or a Twitterer or whatever.
Right.
Um, so like Reddit has sort of, even though it's huge at this point, it's sort of maintained a little bit of that niche nerd status, where it's like I don't know, where Redditors like or people who use Reddit also feel like they're I don't know, like they're a little bit better than people who use Facebook and Twitter, even though of course realistically there's a ton of overlap between those platforms.
Right. Yep.
Um, and So yeah, I think the way to use Reddit for organic promotion is to actually engage with the platform, because you will, in order for your promotional posts not to be removed, you need to make plenty of other non-promotional posts. You need to actually use the platform like a regular user would, or like not just not an average user, because the average user doesn't contribute a lot, but
Mm,
like an active user does.
there you go.
So like I don't know. I post a ton of things on Reddit. I don't only promote my articles though. I do that of course too. I post pictures of horses, of my cats and of my houseplants, and I post reviews of the books I read on Reddit and yada yada yada. And that is how I basically yeah, just the way for me to actively use the platform. And because I actively use the platform, I can also take the liberty of occasionally posting a thing where I'm like, hey, this is a game I'm making, or something like that. But I can only do that because if any moderator or administrator of Reddit looks at my post history, they see that I do enough, like I post enough on the platform to be a legitimate like user and not just somebody who's specifically here for marketing alone. And that again makes Reddit kind of special because on platforms like again Facebook or Twitter, of course, are very fine with you only using their platform for marketing. Nobody on Twitter is going to be like, nah, you post too much about your product. Maybe change it up a little. Like, no, that's just not an attitude that I think exists in other social networks. And well, Reddit is also not so much a social network; it's a link aggregator. So like, but still, there
Right,
is like it does fall into the same very rough category of online place where you hear about things.
right, right.
um,
And
so yeah, I would say that is it possible to make it to make it single edged? Not sure, but there's definitely ways to approach it in which you can make it less likely that people get angry at you for posting a thing.
yeah, and to speak to that too a little bit, I think it really still goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of, being genuine or authentic.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I've seen lots of different posts and such that have that level of authentic. Sometimes it's in a very broad way, like the underdog post, which is when I like to classify like, oh, I've been making this game for so many years. But I think speaking directly to kind of just niches in general, like from what I understand, Strange Horticulture, for example, followed a very similar approach in terms of authenticity around some of the themes and niches that existed in the game itself. But again, like what you already shared before too, is just that sense of authenticity behind obviously being an active user on the platform is probably a good combo to at least get as close as single edged as you can.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot easier actually, as it happens, if you are sort of a small company or an indie dev or even a solo dev. Like it is. Of course, you can also like a marketing manager at a bigger company can also be an active Reddit user and actually make use of that. But it's just gonna like it's very sort of, I think it's biased towards that underdog, as you mentioned.
Hmm.
There's also again like that also happens often enough that people on Reddit do call it out. Like
Yeah. Right. Yep.
if you post a thing like I was working on this for 10 years, like my friends and I are making this indie game, like people will be like, people will also be like saying they will be calling you a liar in the comments for like because they've also seen that often enough. Even though yeah, probably it's probably true. It's not. It's um.
They will
So
find
yeah.
out and know. They do that. Like Redditors are known for if you're gonna make a
Oh yeah,
statement
like
like that.
somebody absolutely somebody's gonna check your post history, and if you like, for example, if you've posted, my friends are making this game yesterday and today, or you're like, I'm making this game, somebody, or the other way around, especially somebody's going to call you out on that, and then they're all going to downvote your post. And so, like, if you lie about your game on Reddit, make sure you lie constantly and thoroughly and everywhere, because otherwise people are going to definitely notice the inconsistency.
And I can't imagine that would be good for a long-term strategy with anything you
No, I
plan
don't think
on
so either.
doing.
No, I think I also consider it the easier and more like uh, long-term healthy solution to just tell the truth.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Well said. Well, Alice, we can't thank you enough for these deep dives and discussions around this topic as a whole. But as we close here, I'd love for you to, share, either three suggestions or tips, from what we discussed today.
All right. So I think the one of them I just have to, because I'm not sure, like if we're talking to, if we're, it depends on who we're talking to, but if we're talking to people working on their first games, like maybe even sort of younger newbie devs, students, those sort of people, if I'm talking to like if part of our audience is people who are getting into game dev at the moment,
Hmm.
then I have to give them my number one tip of like just finish a thing. Just
Yes.
just finish a thing, anything. Just make a tiny game and finish it. Publish it, upload it on your website for free. Just put it in your portfolio, put it on itch, put it on Steam, wherever. Just finish a thing, because like I very much believe that we learn a lot from going through the whole process of starting a project, doing a project, finishing a
Mm.
project, and that by just working on one game for 5 years, you learn a lot less than by doing two or three project within that time frame, or many more. Like your first game should not take you a year to complete. It should take you like a day, because you need to finish a thing and you need to learn how to finish a thing. So that's just something that I always tell people who like try to get into game dev, especially if they're hobbyists who are like, oh, but I can only work on my game for, I don't know, a few hours a week. It's like, okay, but then still finish a game in a week, because like you need to get used to finishing things. It's important. So that's my that's my number one tip.
Awesome.
And I guess apart from that is like one other theme of our discussion today is, I think, bring more of bring more outside things into gaming, because I think the whole industry always profits from it. That's of course a thing like regarding diversity. So like, yeah, if you're not a person regularly represented or thought of as the average game developer, then by all means, yeah, just bring yourself into it. That's also very good. But it also applies to any sort of topics and hobbies. I'm like, yeah, if you have a weird hobby and that doesn't exist, that doesn't have an overlap with video games yet, I think it's gonna, like, the whole industry is gonna be enriched by you taking that into it, which doesn't like, of course, doesn't mean that you should mash up all of your hobbies with your work. I very much also understand the desire of people to keep a thing separate and to like have a hobby they don't monetize and all that sort of things. Like, absolutely valid. I completely get it. But just I think game devs have a tendency to only look to games for their inspirations, which I think is a big limitation. No, don't just look to games for imitation. Look to, of course, movies and comics and TV and whatever. Those are a bit like closer in the general atmosphere. But no, also look to all sorts of things. Like, look to, like I said, there's so many possible overlap opportunities. If you just bring, like, whatever weird hobby you have, make a game out of it, and the whole industry is going to profit from it.
Nice. And
all right, that's my second thing. Now I need to think of a third.
really
I know,
pushing
put
here.
horses in your game and call me about it. No, I think the other theme that we had is just like that aspect of being genuine. Like, bring your take your subject matter and your target audience at face value, and like respect them, and they'll thank you for it. I think that sort of like being genuine in your outreach, in your marketing, I think that goes a long way. I think sort of, yeah, I think of course there's many big companies who are just too who are too big to do this, but I think as an indie, it's kind of your chance. You kind of have to be genuine and meet people at face value, because you don't have enough of a marketing budget, most likely, to sort of just strew everything so broadly that some of it will stick. You will have to actually go to the people who really care about this and get them to really care about what you're doing.
Yeah, because how else are you going to be able to connect with that audience if you're just trying to like create such broad strokes? I mean, it's just
Yeah.
it's
I think like
yeah.
people like companies with multi-million marketing budget can do that, but you're not going to be able to compete with that. So it's better to like focus on your strengths, which is that you can be taken seriously if you actually like just approach people on more of an eye level than and just telling everyone this is the hypest thing you've ever seen. Everybody should want it.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for those tips. Really good ones that I think in a lot of ways, for whether, regardless of what stage you're in, something to definitely consider as you approach the marketing of your game, especially with niche games. So, Alice, can't thank you enough. But before we depart, would love for you to share what are good ways people can reach out to you, find more information about what you do or your websites? What information can you share with us today so people can learn more or reach out?
Of course. So the website I've been talking about the whole time is called The Main Quest, and that's MANE. So it's a pun for a horse's mane. So themainquest.com. My personal website, where you can find my contact info and other projects I've worked on, is aliceruppert.ch. That's ALICERUPPERT.ch. And you can find my emails and my contact data on there basically. But the platform I'm also like still most active on, even though it feels like it's dying these days, is Twitter, where you can find me at Malice da Firenze. So that's just my name with an M in front, and then Da Firenze because I'm still an Assassin's Creed nerd at heart.
Awesome. Well, Alice, I really can't thank you enough for being here today on the show. People, please, if you're looking for additional guidance, especially if it's with anything relating with horses, reach out to Alice or check out her content or just say hi on Twitter. I'm sure she would love it. And again,
Absolutely.
Alice, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. All great stuff.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.